name is Eruç. I live in Gig Harbor now. I have been in the Seattle area since 1999. And I have been on this big quest that I call Six Summits Project in memory of a friend whose name is Göran Kropp. He was a Swedish adventurer who had bicycled from Sweden to Nepal in 1996 to climb Everest. He was famous for having towed his climbing gear behind his bicycle on a trailer. And I read his book, and of course, ideas were swirling in my head. In 97, while in a software development lab, standing in front of a world map hanging on the wall, I had traced my finger across that map. It was a map of world with the Pacific in the middle, America's on the right, and old world on the left. So with a swoop of my finger across that thing, across the Bering Straits, I found myself reaching Turkey, and I started asking how. And each how question was a problem to be solved. I'm an engineer by training. I'm a problem solver, so wired that way. I was born in Cyprus, raised in Turkey, came to US in '86, and that idea, journey home, and giving it a name, gave it a handle, and that made it seem possible. So that became a quiet obsession. Not everybody needed to know, because people tend to question such ideas. They get cynical and they ask, have you done anything like that before? Which is a typical question. I don't know who conditions the individuals in our society to come up with that question out of reflex. Have you done anything like that before? It's a comeback. It never fails. 99% of the folks that I talk to will ask that question. Fortunately, I don't have to answer that question as thoroughly now. I just tell them I have 15 Guinness World Records and counting. So yeah, I have, and move on. And so this thing stewed for a while, and I was reading books, trying to find paths where on charts where there were no roads, and trying to figure out how I was going to do this. And then, of course, if you get to Turkey, then why stop there? You can continue on west and come back to where you started. So the idea of travel around the Northern Hemisphere was coming together. And when I started thinking that way, I realized, well, there's the Atlantic to be crossed, and that blue water requires suitable vessel. And looking into others who have done similar things, I found Jason Lewis, who was in the process of doing a circumnavigation by human power using a pedal-driven propeller boat vessel that he used across these ocean crossings. And then there was the Ocean Rowing Society. They were organizing races across oceans, typically on the Atlantic at that time, and they had used rowboats. And that's how I got a hold of a used rowboat in 2004. And that boat has been with me ever since. That yellow boat that I'm going to show you has been on 4 ocean crossings with me, and this is her 5th with me. My career total in days rowed on the ocean is 1,008 right now. 927 of that is solo, and on that vessel. So those are both Guinness World Records career totals. And when in 2001, Göran came to Seattle, I was in the American Alpine Club organizing committee. We were in the backstage. We got to meet him, told him about my plans, and he said, when are you starting? Do you have sponsors? Those were the 2 questions he came up with. He didn't say anything like that before. So you talk to the right people. They ask the tough questions, and the toughest one is, when are you starting? And that's a sign of commitment. When you put a date down and work toward a deadline, then it becomes a project management issue rather than dreams, and rather than just talk. Big talk turns into a project. Then you have to take steps toward that deadline. Get tasks done, assign tasks to other people when you can't get it done yourself. and find the funding, so forth. And all of that just smoothly works toward a deadline then. So we had the chance to go rock climbing for the first time in the September of 2002, September 30th. And we had an accident. Göran fell and he died. And that was a turning point for me. I said, no more excuses. I need to do this now. I sat across the table with Nancy, then my fiance. I said, I must do this now. She said, you will, you must. And we never looked back. We had a Lakeview condo in Seattle, sold that, moved to another house that was farther north and away from the city, cut the mortgage commitment by half, sold the second car, rearranged our finances so that I could take off with the limited funds that we did have. I rode across the Atlantic Ocean in 2006 from Canary Islands to Guadeloupe, 96 days, to gain additional experience, and I felt ready. In 2007, I launched from Bodega Bay on the Pacific Ocean and rode to Papua New Guinea waters. It took me 311 days. It was a strong La Nina year, which didn't allow me to cross the equator, and I ended up being driven west. Then returned there and rode the Bismarck Sea, worked my way south across Papua New Guinea to Coral Sea shores, and rode the Coral Sea across to Cape York. They did some kayaking along the shores to get to paved roads. Clockwise around Australia. Along the way, I climbed Kosciuszko. Then across the Indian Ocean to Africa, and I climbed Kilimanjaro. In 2003, I had bicycled up to Alaska to climb Mount McKinley. And I did that Göran style, towing my climbing gear, using studded tires. I left February 1st and bicycled north in winter conditions through across British Columbia and Yukon, and walked the length of the Kahiltna Glacier and made it to the summit May 2003. And then during the circumnavigation, Kosciuszko, we climbed that with Nancy, walked up it actually. It's that 4,000 foot high hill. And it was an easy walk up, enjoyable. And that was April 2010. And June 2011, I climbed Kilimanjaro with friends and Nancy and my 79-year-old father, who had taken me up my first mountain at age 11. I bypassed Everest, Elbrus. Sponsorships were just not happening during the aftermath of 2008, 2010 financial crisis. And then I also bypassed Aconcagua. I hurried from Namibia all the way to Venezuela, then across the Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico to reach Louisiana, then finished my journey in 5 years. 5 years, 11 days is what it took. So that's the summary of what I did. That became the first solo circumnavigation by human power. Jason Lewis had partners on his, he had a two-person boat, and he had varying partners on his pulling boat. His became the first sort of self-propelled.
So we're losing your video. You're frozen on our screen. Maybe you're getting away from the Wi-Fi at the yacht club.
And into you are. Yes, people are making noises. They're working, and I need to get to a quiet spot.
Okay, that's better.
So, okay, I am walking to a quiet spot right now. So now in this effort, I'm Pacific. There we go. I am going to aim for Everest. I left from Crescent City June 22nd. Took me 80 days to get to Hawaii. I stopped here with the hope that I could work on getting a visa to China, which still is not happening. I replaced the chart plotter on my rowboat. I had a couple of repairs that I wanted to do. I repositioned the water maker to solve a vacuum problem I was having. So I had to lower it below the sea level so that I had positive pressure at the intake. All of these things, tinkering on the boat took place. It also gave me a chance to meet the University of Hawaii researchers who have drift models. They were asked to help, for example, in giving an estimate on where the debris would land from Fukushima after the tsunami there, and the distribution of the debris field is what they were simulating. So they modified those models to see what was possible for my rowboat going west. It's not going to be easy. It was difficult getting here. And going west, there are a bunch of curlicues of eddies and counter currents and such in my path. As I continue west with the help of winds, I'm going to have to keep changing latitude to negotiate these eddies and currents. When I get to the longitude of Guam, that will be December, January timeframe. And in January, there are northerly and northeasterly winds, which will try to depress my route further south. We are concerned about getting shipwrecked on the northeast shores of Philippines, or may have to run between the islands of Mindanao and Luzon, which would make everything very complicated. And we'll see how it all plays out. I would like to pass through Luzon Strait, north of the Philippines, south of Taiwan, and then get into the South China Sea. And I will probably keep running to Da Nang in Vietnam. The goal was to reach Hong Kong, because that's where Ocean Recovery Alliance founder and current president Doug Woodring is based. He operates out of Hong Kong, and I'm an ambassador for Ocean Recovery Alliance. My goal is to raise awareness about the plastics pollution issue in our oceans. And they have prepared a stream of educational content, and I will share that link with you. If you go to westboundrower.com, that will forward you to my website at eruç.com. And under causes, if you look in the menu, under causes, there is plastic pollution in the oceans, and that's where you will find the links to educational content that Ocean Recovery Alliance is issuing. I am also populating my blog with the links to such content. So I am going to make these available to Carol so she can distribute that to you. I turned 60 in July after I launched. I'm still carrying on. A lot of what I do depends on breathing and moving. As difficult as this is, it is more a mental challenge than a physical challenge. The physical problems that I have on the boat could be chafing, could be salt blisters, could be heat, because I will be at 19 to 20 north band, and it is just baking in Hawaii here. What makes it tolerable are the trade winds. And when the wind dies down a bit, it just becomes intolerable. I necessarily have to rest at night because the cabin turns into a sauna during the day. And I use the breeze during the day to cool down. And typically I'm outside, I should say, from daybreak to sunset. And then after that, I rest and write updates to my blog or check my emails, whatnot, and try to sleep 8 hours a day. That changes when the conditions require that I must stay out and power the vessel. I am the engine for this thing, and for it to keep a certain course, I need to be physically out there rowing this and having it point a certain way. This vessel relies on this oceans to carry it. It is very much dependent on the winds. The currents also influence what it does, and swells. So those three forces act on this vessel. And ahead of departure, I must research climatological data that goes back 10, 15 years and try to come up with that route that's going to work, that's most likely to succeed. And after having designed that route, then my battle is to stay on it. As the seas push my boat around, if it's doing what I want, then I can help it speed up the progress, or I can take time off, do laundry, rinse my clothes of salt and my skin the same way. I could do maintenance on the boat, so forth. Basically, keep things working, including my body. If the boat is doing things I do not want, then I would need to row to correct that, or maybe put out a para anchor to slow down the loss of ground, for example, and just work with what the ocean throws at me. Statistically speaking, the rowboat should return to the route that I designed. And if it varies from that, then I take action to minimize deviation from that route. This year was special. I launched from Crescent City on June 22nd, a late departure, so that I could time my row nonstop, passing north of Hawaii and reaching the longitude of Guam and Saipan at the end of December, to avoid typhoons in Western Pacific. However, the mid-latitude jet stream formed farther north and farther west this year, moving the Pacific high to a different spot, bringing northwesterly winds to California shores. So after I left, since I left late, I had to launch farther north because Southern California valleys like Sacramento Valley and such heat up quite a bit during the summer, and this summer was especially hot. And the upwelling currents along the California shores create cold water, create cold currents just along the shore, meaning there's always an onshore wind in Southern California. So any wind that comes in turns toward the shore, and a solo rower with one person at the helm, on the oars, who has to sleep at some point and rest, then gets sucked in toward land. That's kind of what happened to me with this changing wind regime. I had strong, persistent northwesterly winds, and unless I rowed, the boat wanted to run parallel to the shore. So by rowing, I was able to keep a southerly course, and with that, I was able to put distance between me and land. As land receded southeast, I got farther away. Coming across Monterey, I was about 120 miles west of Monterey when I got there, and that still was not enough. The pattern was that the winds and currents were going to suck me around Point Conception toward Baja. And in that flow, I had to break free of that flow. And south of me was a wind hole where there was no wind. It was a junction, a fork in the road. If I went southwest of that,
past northwest of that, heading southwest, I would go to Hawaii just fine. If I ended up passing northeast of that, meaning I would end up going southeast, then I would end up along the Baja shores. And neither of the latter I wanted. I didn't want to end up in the wind hole nor along the Baja. It would have been big trouble. If I kept going south and dropped into that wind hole, things would be unpredictable, winds variable, not a defined currents, and I can't take advantage of the oceans to power my vessel. So I had to get southwest. And fortunately, a cold front passed over my boat, which when a cold front passes, winds veer, meaning winds turn clockwise a bit. So all the northwesterly winds became north-northwest or north for a couple of days. And that was my break out of jail free card. And I put 18-hour days for 5 days in a row. I would stay out the whole day. And after I had dinner, I would sleep for 4 hours, wake up, stay out as long as I could tolerate it, and then go in for another 2-hour nap, get back out, and just stay outside, powering the boat. The only stop I would have would be to feed myself or to make water, so forth. And after 5 days of this, I broke southwest, and I was on my way to Hawaii. And I had other additional issues. These cold streams of wind would come from the Gulf of Alaska, all the way from Queen Charlotte Sound. And when cold air arrives and meets more humid air for the south, they create squalls. And these lines of squalls would come and create northerly winds for me. And it just made life difficult for a good 10 days in August, early August. But I was able to negotiate those and keep going. One thing that we had to do was risk management. Storms could form, they form in the nursery of storms south of Mexico and Guatemala. And those waters, the winds are stalled, and the currents, there's no current there to stir up the water. And so there's no upwelling that we see along the California shore. So the water gets really hot, and any low pressure system that forms there as air rises, as it heats, it starts turning due to Coriolis effect. And once it starts turning, then steering winds drive these low pressure systems due west, northwest, or northwest. And then as they progress over hot water and feeding on the moisture over those waters, they turn into hurricanes. So it starts as a tropical disturbance. It becomes a tropical depression, then a tropical storm, and then hurricane. That's the progression of the storms getting stronger. And these things get to about 125 west, which is pretty much due south of San Francisco. And then they meet colder water and they lose power, but they can still carry on west as a remnant low, as a weaker storm, and change the winds. To be safe, I had to stay at about 25 north latitude, and I carried on west. And final one to bother me was Tropical Storm Linda. And Linda formed south of Mexico, just west of Guatemala. And then as it was projected to go northwest and pass northeast of me, the steering winds for it vanished, and she just stalled and sat there spinning and powering up. And it became what's called an annular hurricane. An annular hurricane has a complete wall around the eye, This one had 2 and a weaker third one, I believe. And it was turning into a massive storm, category 4 hurricane or so. And instead of going northwest, it decided to run due west. And it originally was projected to pass over my location. By the time it got to my location, it would be 40 to 45 knot winds in the over the eye, and so we made plans for an orderly retreat, we would contact U.S. Coast Guard. They put us in touch with the Joint Rescue Coordination Center in Honolulu, and they started tracking my location and the course of Linda. And at the time that we contacted them, they had a vessel 200 miles away from me. So that vessel would take about 24 hours to get to my location, pick me up. We would batten the hatches on my rowboat and leave her be, hope that it survived, pick it up later somewhere near Hawaii, charter a vessel and go get it. That was the orderly evacuation plan. Fortunately, we did not need that. As Linda came, it tracked further south and further west than we anticipated, and it got weaker down to 30 knot winds. It didn't affect me, other than just stalling me so high at 25 north, which made me work overtime to get to Hawaii. So from here on, I am prepared. I was testing the water maker yesterday because I had a vacuum problem and air was leaking into the system. The water maker desalination unit uses reverse osmosis at high pressure. It relies on high pressure to drive seawater across a membrane. And that membrane is so tight that at molecular level, it separates larger salt molecules from the water molecules. And what remains on the pressurized side of the membrane is now seawater with some fresh water drawn out of it. So it's more saline, and that's called brine. And that brine is ejected with each pump, with each movement of the piston in the pump. And on the other side of the membrane, potable water sweats, and I collect that for my own consumption. I reconstitute my freeze-dried foods. I make drinks from powdered hydration mixes, for example, or protein shakes and such. I make those. I rinse my clothes. I do laundry. I use salt water to wash my laundry and then rinse with fresh water to get the salt out of them. So that's better, more economical as far as water consumption goes. I also have to rinse my own body. Imagine rowing with just your undies in such hot weather and sweating inside in the nook of your knee. And that sweat evaporates and leaves salt behind. And that salt then starts irritating the hair follicles and such, and they start itching. If I scratch that, I break skin and it itches even more. So the only way around that is to rinse regularly. So hygiene and maintenance is a regular concern on the rowboat. And deal with boredom. That's a big one. I need to keep my mind focused. I need to set daily goals. I need to turn everything into a reward. Row another 3 hours, then you can have food. That protein bar I want, well, you'll earn it in 2 hours, that kind of thing. So those short-term goals and changing everything into a reward helps my mental state as well. That I'm goal-oriented. I never focus on the end goal, although that, of course, strategically guides my decisions to get to the other side, but everything has to be broken down into short-term goals so that I can taste success at the end of the day. If I set my goal to be 30 miles, 40 miles away, and I get there at the end of the day, then I have completed my mission for that day. That feels good, and I just keep that, hug that good feeling, and then do the same thing the next day. You keep doing that, and you feel like you're succeeding. If I look at the remaining distance to Da Nang, Vietnam now, that's about 5,800 nautical miles. And at the rate that I'm moving, 1.6 knots or so on average, that every hour, that number would go down by 1 or 2 miles. It's like watching a tree grow, and it just never gets smaller. So daily goals is the way to go to keep my mind healthy. Let me walk over to the boat and show you the boat, and then I'll take questions. So,
While you're walking, Erden, maybe you can tell us, does the boat have a name?
the boat came to me as Calderdale in 2004. We never renamed it. I was hoping that I would have a boat sponsor who would sponsor and decide on the name, and we never had one. So she doesn't have a name. We go by Around and Over, which is the nonprofit that we have formed to educate and inspire children, especially. So you see on the boat, this is a 24-foot vessel, 6-foot beam or so. You see solar panels, custom panels on the bow and on the side of the cabin in the back and on top. Total capacity of these solar panels is 295 watts. And that allows me to top up my batteries. I have a total of 2 batteries, total of 220 amp hours on board. And no matter how much I use my batteries, even in cloudy conditions, the batteries are topped up to 100% by noon. It's awesome. You see that there are 3 rowing positions on this boat, or locks. This boat was designed for 2 people. And if both were rowing, it would be fore and aft positions. And as a solo rower, I used either the middle or the aft position. That changes the trim of the vessel. So when I am in the cabin in the back, sleeping here, the stern is sitting lower and the bow rises a bit, which creates what we call lee helm, which means the boat would naturally want to run downwind. The rudder is in the back, and depending on which side I decide to receive the wind before going to sleep, the boat tends to pull in that direction. So if I receive the wind from the starboard side, she would not go downwind unless the wind is weak, like 5 knots or so. If in conditions like 10, 20, 25 knots, she would ride about 20, 25 degrees to the weather. And that gives me some control over where the boat goes. And if I want to go straight, I could wake up, jibe the boat in sailing terms. And after that, I would reset the rudder and continue on with the other direction. So you do a zigzag and get back to straight forward.
Is that ramen?
Yeah, I have ramen noodles on board. I added into my meals. I don't use I don't use the packets, but if you take that and put it into a hot meal, just the noodles themselves, not the high sodium packet, it adds calories. I do have what is it called? MCT oil in powder form. And that also adds calories. It's the fat content that I had, the fat intake that I had ignored in previous crossings. So I'm adding that. I'm using that in my coffee and in my cereal. And that allows me to have a bit more balanced diet. If it's only carbohydrates, and then I'm pre-diabetic on the other side. By the time I get to the other side, high sodium, high carbohydrate diet is not good. So getting back to shade here. So if you have folks with questions, I can address them.
Thank you. And let me tell folks that you can either type them in the chat, or since there aren't that many of us, if you just want to unmute yourself and ask Erden the question directly, I think that's absolutely fine. I know I have a bunch of questions. Well, I'll go ahead and start. Who's going to be working on getting your visa while you're rowing?
I have dual citizenship. I carry US and Turkish passports. So I left my US passport with Nancy and the full application that I had submitted to the Chinese consulate in San Francisco back in March. And I'd been turned down since and couldn't make progress. I am hoping that she will be able to use those two to get a visa and then come meet me on arrival, should I head for China. Failing that, I am heading for Vietnam, and that Vietnam will give me a visa on arrival, so I can land with my Turkish passport. Nancy will come with my US passport, and then I will use either one. Doesn't matter at this point, because Vietnam doesn't care. Either one will get a visa on arrival. So that's how we negotiated that problem. If I, from the sea, I'm going to try to find out if I can get a visa in Hong Kong to China. If I have any hesitation about Chinese giving visas, even in Hong Kong, then I must go to Vietnam. They will change their policies because they have the Winter Olympics coming up. So at some point, they're going to have to say, these are the requirements for you to come in. And then we'll see if we...
Right.
I saw a question saying what the hull was made of. It is a plywood vessel. It's a kit boat that was sent to the participants of the Atlantic rowing race starting in '97 through about 2002, and then they went to molded hulls, composite hulls, and such. The kit is made of plywood, then it's stitched and glued, and everybody had the same vessel. It was team against team, two-person design. And this vessel was built in 2001 by two British men who rowed from Canary Islands to Barbados, and then in 2001 also. And in 2004, a mother-daughter team used the same vessel to row the same routes. And I received the vessel, and I started using it since.
Holly has a question.
I do. I have two. I'll start with the less delicate first. What's the toilet situation?
I have a bicycle, the water bottles that you put in bicycles, larger opening. It's easy to aim. That's for peeing, and just pour overboard and then rinse it. That's how you deal with the little number one. Number two, you use a bucket. Fill the bucket about a third of the way, and then do your business, and so it doesn't smear. I have a toilet brush even to clean it, and so that's how we deal with that. And then the biggest issue is the detail is one has to really clean the bottom. If anything remains,
down there, it'll just spread and smear and get all over as I'm rowing back and forth, sitting on the rowing seat. So I really have to dilute everything. And so after I take care of my toilet needs, I make sure to rinse my bottom quite a bit and then use fresh water to dilute everything. And then during the day, I rinse my seat, I rinse my bottom. Just to make things easier, I do row with a single underwear or just bare bottoms. And that way, it's easy to rinse everything and clean up. Hygiene is very important.
Yes, I can imagine. Well, and I have 2 teenage boys, so I had to ask that question. The other is, I'm curious about Wi-Fi coverage in the middle of the ocean. I've looked at your tracker, but do you have coverage, or do you care?
So I used the GPS chart plotter to navigate. I have on board an Iridium Go device that has 9.8K baud rate. And with that, I can send emails and small images. I have a BGAN terminal on board that has higher bandwidth. It can go up to 128K. With that, I should be able to send videos. I left with the wrong charger from Crescent City. They had shipped me the wrong charger. I never tested it. At home, I tested it using wall charger. And then on the boat, I had the 12-volt charger. It had a wrong jack at the other end of it. And so that BGAN terminal turned into a big brick that I carried all the way to Hawaii. We got the right one now. It is charging fine. And I should be able to share short videos also. I send my blog updates as emails to Nancy, and Nancy posts them for me on our website. Otherwise, the tracking is done automatically. I have what's called a yellow brick. And that thing, if I set it to hourly pings, it can last up to 90 days on one charge. So it's a very reliable unit. Near land, like on arrival here from Diamond Head to here, I turned the signals to 15 minutes, every 15 minutes approaching Cocoa Head. And then I came to Diamond Head here, just southeast of Waikiki. Then I turned it to every minute so that people could see the details of my approach into the marina. I'll do the same thing on departure here, every minute until I get out of the harbor, 15 minutes heading west, and then hourly in open ocean. That's automatic. It's on our tracking page. That's what you see. I also added the predict wind illustration, wind layer on our tracking page. So there are 2 maps that you see. One shows my track. The other one shows as a red dot where I am and what the winds are at that moment. And so you'll be able to commiserate with me as I struggle.
Have you ever had a moment of being really scared?
I did not understand that. Could you repeat?
I'm sorry. I said, have you had a moment of being really scared?
No, not on this crossing. I will probably have that west of Guam and passing north of Philippines. It'll be strong currents, 2 to 5 knots, tide rips, or riptides, sorry, and standing waves, swirling water. It's going to be a washing machine. But I had such concerns approaching the Great Barrier Reef as well, and I did okay. So I think I'll be fine, but I am concerned. Trepidation will remain until I am through it and past it on the other side.
Awesome.
But there's no room for fear. So you basically prepare for this, try to line up the boat at the right place, study the charts so that you have an idea about where to go should it not follow what you planned. Then I am also trying to arrange for another vessel to shadow me in the Luzon Strait just north of in those turbulent waters. Doug Woodring, Ocean Recovery Alliance president, may charter a vessel and come out to meet me. If that happens, then we'll be okay. And we're also going to be contacting the Philippine Coast Guard to see if they would be nearby, just so we have a layer of safety built around this. And once inside the South China Sea, I will have a bit more control over the boat. But going through those shoals and rocks and reefs and small islands peppered between Philippines and Taiwan, that'll be a scary episode, yes.
Yeah. Good luck. It sounds like you're well prepared. Thank you.
I think she said you sound well prepared. Yeah, Holly, you're a
Yeah.
little muffled.
Yeah, I definitely try to anticipate the problems and then have solutions in hand.
So, Erden, what's your favorite protein shake flavor and how many calories a day do you have to eat?
Well, I can only eat so much. I have to have my 3 meals a day for sure. Breakfast. I found this vegan freeze-dried meal option. It's called Huel, Huel, as in fuel. These guys make 6 or 8 flavors, and then each sealed bag contains about 7 dinners, and I am I add that into my meals, and it helps me diversify my intake, and trying to go to a quiet place. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
It's just too much background noise.
Well, it's what, coming up on 10 o'clock there now?
Yes,
People are moving.
it is. They're watering the plants. I was on the pool side, so they were doing their maintenance work, and they got to talk a lot. So,
Pool size sounds very nice.
yeah.
How do you train in advance, or do you train along the way?
A little bit of both. I try to be as fit as possible on departure, but nothing prepares you for 12 hours a day. So the goal has to be that I launch with favorable conditions, so I'm not stressed at the very beginning as much. So first 2 weeks, every stroke counts. I cannot get injured. And then I should not expect performance until 4 to 6 weeks. But the departure from California didn't work out that way. It's demanded my full participation right off the bat, and I fared okay. So my general fitness level is high, and that helps a lot.
Do we have more questions from participants?
So when I get to land in Vietnam, I am going to secure the boat, put it in a container, 40-foot container. Then depending on sponsorship, I will return to US and gather high altitude gear if I have sponsorship for Everest, deal with permits and whatnot, and get back. And then return to my point of landfall with my bicycle, trailer, and panniers, whatever I'm going to take on overland, and bicycle to foothills of Everest. At this point, if China does not give me a visa, I am considering bicycling through Laos, then Myanmar into India to get to Nepal, and then sort out the Everest plans there. Myanmar is also a big question mark. Right now, they had a coup, and they're also leery of foreigners, trying to keep witnesses out, I suppose, or they also would be concerned about the pandemic. A pandemic has really messed everybody's perception of foreigners and people passing through. So that's an alternative route south of China. If China still is closed, we'll have to play this one day at a time. March is when I will get to land, and then there will be plenty of time after that to sort these things.
Well, Erden, it's just been great having you part of Open Up the series. And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute. For me, if I were to try and summarize in the context of endurance, it sounds like you have set your expectations, you've taken care of yourself and your craft, you're planning for various outcomes, you set short-term goals for yourself, and those sound like tasks that any of us could do as we're trying to endure anything from COVID to rowing.
Yes.
So I
And
still
so
can't imagine.
if we want to apply this to COVID, troubles won't last forever.
Mhm.
The sun always will rise in the morning. And also, as a lifelong athlete, what I know is that fatigue is a feeling, can be managed. Fatigue is temporary, it'll pass. But quitting is forever. It scars my mind. So the wisdom side of things requires that I must know when to quit. So there's a fine line there that I'm walking. I am pushing the limits of human performance here, given my age as well. So I am going to stay on top of this and carry it as far as I can go, and make sure that I rest just enough to stay on the edge and not fall apart, but not rest too much that I would shipwreck on the Philippine Islands. So it's going to take a lot of work to clear Philippines into the South China Sea. That's my biggest concern right now. January is going to be a very difficult month. Once I get into February, things tend to be a bit more forgiving, it seems.
I put in the chat window the tracker link. So those of you who are online, I guess everyone's online today, you can look at the chat window and you'll see I sent 3 links out for you. One's the tracker, one is the Westbound Rower website, I believe. I think it
Yeah,
might
if you
have
go
been two of
to
the same.
westboundrower.com, so I'll just write it here, www.westboundrower.com. That's easier to remember, and it will forward you straight to my website. And there you have the tracker, you have information, you have blog updates, and even donate page if people have the means and the inclination. So please spread the word about my journey. I am trying to reach schools so that.
Uh-oh, we lost him. Let's see. He'll probably join back up. Meanwhile, while we're waiting, I'm going to put 2 questions in chat. Aha, there he is. He's back. He's connecting to audio.
Apologize for dropping out.
Oh, no worries. I'm just asking folks 2 quick questions while we're closing. Erden, so how can we support you other than donating, which is totally great? Like, do you receive messages or while you're out and about?
Yes. So if you go to the website, you are going to see causes, and under causes around and over is our website, and that has an email address that can reach us, and the team will get those messages to me. So Nancy's monitoring all of this on the background, and she'll get messages to me.
Okay.
And if you share the website and make sure that teachers know about this and our educational program with Ocean Recovery Alliance under causes, plastic pollution in the ocean is where the Westbound Rower Wednesdays stream of Westbound Rower Wednesdays is their weekly program that they are putting out there, and it's good stuff. So it's in 4 languages as well: English, Chinese, Spanish, and lately in Turkish. So we're trying to playing catch up on Turkish side. We just found a translator.
Yeah, you're a little busy.
Yeah.
To do the translation. So we'll be sure. I'll work with Holly and our children's librarian to make the connections with the Orcas school that we have. And one last chance for anyone to ask any questions before we let Erden go and have his yummy breakfast.
I had one question.
Yes, Nancy.
Coming through. Okay. As far as stamina and physical fitness as you're doing it, I've done some not real long rowing, but my tailbone gets sore after very long at all. And I think of you doing all of that. I'm sure you probably get past that stage and toughen up, but
Well, if your tailbone is specifically getting sore, make sure you have the rowing seat oriented correctly. There's a hollow in the rowing seat that needs to be pointing back to the bow, pointing to your back toward the bow. That's where the tailbone is supposed to hang. So just making that passing comment. I do have a pad that I use. It's a thin rubber pad. That seems to be enough. I'm managing. There's a lot of fidgeting going on, of course, to be comfortable.
And then do you have any repetitive use kinds of things?
Yeah, you can have chafing happening. You can have chafing happening in the armpits. You can have chafing happening in the crotch. And when I have layers of clothing, that's a problem. At this latitude, I am either wearing a very thin synthetic underwear or just going bare bottoms and rinsing. If I really have to, I can apply some baby rash cream, and that tends to calm things down, any such problems. So repetitive use, yes, it can be a problem. Blisters in the hands, I don't get so much because I use open hand grip. And so that's my hand right now, right hand. See it's toughened, and it is in good condition. So what I do is, instead of gripping hard and using the thumb is at the end of the oar or handle, and the grip is like so. And if you have open grip, then it helps with the positioning of the blade at the entrance. It goes down and it stays square, and it has a chance to settle in the oarlock, and it just clicks into place. And it finds its own position naturally. And it also, since I have a loose grip on it, as it settles down, it doesn't jerk around and pull the skin to create blisters. So over time, it just gets tougher. So at the beginning, that can be a bit difficult. So you do use open hand grip at the beginning as well, and pay attention to how the skin feels. Once it starts feeling warm, that's pre-blister. Before it blisters, I must put a glove on, and then row the rest of the day with the glove on. The next morning, start without the gloves again, and just keep doing that. And there comes a time when you will not need the gloves anymore. It takes about 10 days or so for the skin to toughen and to adjust.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Anybody else? Boy, that was a good tip. All right. Well, Erden, thank you again so much for opening our endurance series, and we look forward to keeping track of you and connecting the kids here with this great adventure. And hopefully,
I am going to put you in touch with Becky Rogers, who's an ultra runner, and she was attempting the fastest known time all time men or women, on the Pacific Crest Trail this summer. But due
Yeah.
to the forest fires and toxic smoke in the air and such, she had to reroute. It just got out of control. And so this summer she wasn't able to do it because of the fires. I will put you in touch, and I think that'll be interesting chat for you all as well.
Yes, indeed. We have Rosie Kuhn coming up this Thursday to talk about endurance during the writing process. We have Pete and Ginger from sailing vessel Irene, who are going to talk about sailing around the world during COVID and enduring that. We'll have Terry, Blaine's wife, who you may know, speaking to us about the endurance of birds as they migrate. So I'm looking for someone to do a topic about illness and pain and enduring through that. We have some good tips on who to contact there. So it should be a great series, and I'm really hopeful that you'll be able to bookend it in the spring and bring it to a
Nice.
close.
Yes, looking forward to that.
Saying, well, enjoy the days you have left there in Waikiki.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to address your audience, and yeah, let's do this again.
Sounds good, Erden. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.